Morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on IPM performance for the month of October. All of you may have received the industry mailer yesterday, and what we have seen is the growth of the industry. The value growth is double digit. Even the unit growth is close to 7%. So a very encouraging growth shown by the industry for the month of October. Also, what is very nice is the three growth levers for this month have been very positive. The value driven, the price driven, the new introduction driven growth. All the growths are very strong and positive for the month of October. However, before even going to how the industry has performed, we have done a small analysis on how the different therapy segments, acute, chronic, and subchronic segments have performed, or how they have evolved over a period of time. So every month we do a different analysis, which is really liked by the industry, and we have got suggestions on working on something in the acute, chronic, and subchronic segment. So this month we have worked on this evolution of these three segments. After this presentation, we go to the next section of our usual IPM therapy performance, the growth drivers, the top 40 and corporates as well as brands, and the key takeaways. So even before going and looking at the evolution part, let us look at how we define the three segments, how we define the acute segment, the chronic segment, and the subchronic segment. So when we look at the acute segment, it is that medication which is consumed for anywhere between 1 to 7 days. The entire definition is based on the duration of consumption. So acute segment, the medications which would come in this category would be anti-infectives, laxatives, probiotics, analgesics, cough and cold preparations, dry eye preparations, where the duration of consumption is limited to between 1 day to 1 week. Come to the chronic segment, where the consumption may be for more than a year or sometimes lifetime. So the categories which come over here are the anti-diabetes, the antihypertensives, the anti-epileptics, asthma products, and so on and so forth. The subchronic segment would be the ones where, the consumption may be anywhere between 1 to 12 months. So it's not a very short duration like acute, not a very long duration like chronic. But then the categories which come over here are the nutraceuticals, antacids, drugs for neuropathic pain, anti-anemia preparations, anti-tubercular preparations, etc. So what we have done is we have looked at these different categories and what are the different parameters that which will be considered. What are the different parameters that we need to consider and look at the evolution of these segments? So what we have done is we have looked first at a top level, certain long and short-term trends for the different categories. So when we talk about the MAT contribution of the different categories, the acute segment today contributes to almost 50% of the IPM, the subchronic another 20%, and the chronic another 32%. Now, I did not do a long-term trend analysis for the contribution because more or less this contribution has remained the same for the last 5 years. Next interesting part is we look at the growth of all the three segments. First, we look at the growth of the IPM, which actually went up in the COVID times close to 15% and which has now normalized. However, if I look at the acute segment, relatively higher growth trend shown by the acute segment in COVID times and a relatively higher growth even on the MAT October basis shown by this segment today. Now, this growth, what is propelling this growth? What are the different growth levers which are pushing this type of growth for the different therapy areas? Here we see for the acute segment, while price is definitely driving the growth of the market, the volumes stay on a positive side. Whereas if you look at the chronic and the subchronic segment, it is the price and the new introductions which are majorly driving the growth of the segment. The volume-driven growth stays negative for both. Then we also looked at the new introductions. What is the value of the new introductions? How much are they contributing? Net overall for the IPM, new introductions that have happened in the last 24 months, they have given us a turnover of close to 4,300 crores. And the contribution across the different segment of new introductions to the overall value of the segment has been around 2%. Then we next go to the analysis of each segment. So what we have done is, we have looked at the key segments in each therapy area or each acute segment, chronic segment, subchronic segment, which are the key segments which contribute to around 80-85% of this segment, the growth trends for these core segments, the top players, how the top players have performed, and against how they have contributed to that particular therapy and how are they driving the growth of that therapy. We also look at growth drivers for these top players. What we have done is we have broken down these top players into clusters of top 10, next 10, then 31 to 40, and so on and so forth, and how has each cluster behaved. And we have also looked at the new molecules or molecular combinations which have come in the market for the first time in the last 24 months, how those molecules or molecular combinations have performed. So if I were to look at the key segments within the acute therapy, what we see is anti-infectives, gastro, and pain segment. These three segments collectively contribute to around 50% or more than 50% of the acute segment. If I were to look at the growth trends, acute segment anyways had shown a very encouraging growth. And if you look at the anti-infectives, the gastro, the pain segment, these are the ones which have shown extremely high growth in the COVID times, that is MAT October 2021. While the anti-infectives growth normalized in the consecutive times, pain analgesics and respiratory growth continued to be strong. Now, respiratory, especially the cough and cold preparations, they definitely had a role to play in some of the symptoms that were shown. However, what we have seen is the respiratory thing, over a period of time, the growth stayed to be positive and strong. As far as the anti-infectives, gastro, and pain analgesic segment is concerned, you will see for the MAT October period as well, the growth is relatively robust and encouraging. Coming to the top 10 players, what we have done is all the top players in the acute segment, we have segmented them into clusters. So these players come in the rank 1 to 10. These players come in rank 11 to 20. So each cluster, what is the contribution of this cluster to the acute segment? So top 10 are contributing to close to 46% of the acute segment, and they are showing a double-digit growth of 10 and 11%. So if you see the top 20 players, they contribute somewhere around 65 to 70% of the acute segment and to a great extent drive the growth of this segment. Coming to the growth drivers, if you see the top 10 segments or the top 10 players have a relatively good balance of price, new introductions, and volumes. However, if you look at the other three segments or the other three consecutive segments, volume-driven growth is not encouraging, but to a good extent, price is driving the growth. Then come to, okay, before I go to the next slide, now this analysis we have done for a cluster. It is possible that there may be some players in this 11 to 20 which may not necessarily represent the group. So there are one or two exceptions in each of this cluster where the growth driver behavior is not the same as the cluster. So they are the exceptions. But for my presentation, I really could not do so many companies. So I have broken down the companies into clusters based on their rank in that particular therapy area. Then we come to the acute segment, the new molecules or molecular combinations which were launched. So we have seen that for the acute segment, there are 36 new molecules or molecular combinations that entered the market in the last 24 months. However, these 36 new subgroups collectively gave a turnover of only 64 crore. And if you look at the average turnover of each molecule, I'm not talking the brand, average turnover of each molecule, it's very small, or I wouldn't call them a very great blockbuster launch in the category. Next, we go to the chronic segment where we really see significant difference in this section, also certain growth driver section. So coming to the chronic segment, the core segments in the chronic are the cardiac and the anti-diabetic, which are contributing to almost 70% of the chronic segment, followed by neuro, which is around 15% contribution. If I were to look at the growth drivers, in COVID times, cardiac growth was relatively higher and it stayed relatively higher as compared to the other two categories, even for the consecutive MAT periods. Then when we try to break up the chronic segment into further groups, we realize that the top 20 companies, they contribute to around 80% of the chronic segment, and they are showing an encouraging growth at a 5-year value CAGR as well as MAT value growth. There is a segment of one more small set of companies, companies from rank 31 to 40, where in terms of contribution to the chronic segment, it is 4%. But this cluster has shown a growth of around 12% 5-year value CAGR. and 10% growth for the MAT October period. Growth drivers for the top 10 companies, volume driven growth is not negative, but it's very negligible. It is mainly the price and the new introductions that have driven the growth of the market. We have also seen that in case of new introductions for the next companies, the companies between rank 11 to 20, significant contribution is through new introductions, whereas volume driven growths are negative. Now, why this is happening obviously is in chronic segment, there have been many molecules like sitagliptin, dapagliflozin, linagliptin that have gone off patent. Also, some new molecules with patent protection like semaglutide have been launched in the market. So these new introductions, whether it is molecules with patent protections or with molecules that have gone off patent, they have really driven the growth of the markets to some extent. While molecules have gone off patent, many branded generics have entered the segment, but also there has been opportunity for the market to create different combinations with DAPA and Sita losing patent. Now a DAPA plus Sita combination or a DAPA plus Sita plus metformin combination has come in the market, and we see many brands coming in, entering these different combination segment as well. Chronic segment, which are the new molecules or molecular combinations that have come in the market, we'll see there are significant number, close to 34 new subgroups that have entered the market. Unlike the acute segment, there are close to top 4 molecules or molecular combinations which have crossed a turnover of 100 crores. And these are blockbuster launches in this market. Then coming to the subchronic segment. In the subchronic segment, it is nutritionals, which is almost 40% of the market, followed by derma and the gastro segment. So it is the nutritionals, the derma and the gastro segment, which contribute to almost 50% of this market. Coming to the growth trends, the nutritionals growth was relatively higher. It got corrected in the 2022, and now it is back to its normal self. Interesting part in the subchronic segment is the growth that is seen by the neuro-CNS segment in the last 3 years. This growth has not come down. Obviously, in the COVID times, probably there were a lot of cases where there was depression, anxiety, sleeplessness, loss of near and dear ones, creating neuro-related problems. So the growth was relatively higher over here. However, what we have seen after discussing with some of the industry people, as well as some of the doctors, that the footfall for treatment of neuro conditions, the patient footfall has actually improved. So going to a neuro to treat depression is no longer a taboo. People proactively go to the doctors and seek for treatment. Top players, if you look at the top players, the top 20 players, they contribute to almost 65% of this market. The top 10 players, in fact, they contribute to 45% and are showing a double-digit growth. So if you see, the top players in this market are driving the growth of this market to a good extent. Coming to the growth drivers, while the volume-driven growth is negative for the companies from rank 11 and above, for the top 10 companies, price and new introductions are driving the growth. At the same time, if you look at the volume-driven growth is also positive in this category. Looking at the new subgroups or the new molecules, molecular combinations that have come in the market, barring this one molecule, desidustat, which is a sort of oral anti-anemic preparations for patients with kidney conditions, kidney threat conditions, barring that one molecule, no other molecule has really shown a great blockbuster performance. So overall, even though there are 16 new subgroups which entered the market, collectively they have given a turnover of only 55 crore, of which almost 30 crore comes from this one molecule, desidustat. Coming to the key takeaways from this initial section, what we realize that acute segment contributes to almost 50% of the IPM and has shown a relatively better value growth for the current year, whereas the chronic and the subchronic segments have shown a relatively better 5-year CAGR. Price is a major driver of growth for the acute segment, whereas new introductions and price both drive the growth in the acute as well as the subchronic segments. The top 20 companies in each segment contribute to 70 to 80% of the segments and drive the performance of the respective segments. New introductions contribute to only around 20% of the value across different categories. As far as the new molecule or molecular combinations are concerned, close to 86 new launches have happened in the last 24 months. However, blockbuster performance is seen only in the chronic segment. So this was about the analysis of the evolution of the acute, chronic and subchronic segment in the Indian pharma industry. Next, we go to our regular section where we look at the IPM therapy performance. So the market for the month of October has shown an encouraging value growth of close to 13.7% and a unit growth of 6.8%. Among the top categories, it is the anti-infectives category which has shown a robust double-digit growth. Beyond anti-infectives, there are anti-neoplastics, hormonal products, which in terms of absolute contribution may be smaller products, but have shown a double-digit value as well as unit growth. Growth drivers, if I look for the month of October, all the three levers of growth are positive. In fact, if I were to compare with same time last year, the volume-driven growth here was negative. And an encouraging part is after a negative volume growth for the last 4 to 5 months, almost 6 months, this month, the volume-driven growth is on a strong positive track. It's almost 5%. Try to look at the same analysis for the month across different therapy areas. The story seems to be the same across all therapy areas except the anti-diabetes, which is obvious because sitagliptin, dapagliflozin, linagliptin lost patent. So the existing brands may have lost their volume-driven growth. Whereas if you look at the new introductions, to a great extent, new introductions have driven the growth in these markets. Then coming to the top 40 corporates, we see that where the market has actually grown by double digit in terms of value and single digit in terms of unit. However, there are companies like Sun, Cipla, Alchem, McLeod's, GSK, USV, and Glenmark, which continue to show a very strong double digit unit growth in the market. Among the next 20 players, it is FDC, Cadila, Corona, Fords, which have shown a double digit unit growth. Look at the top 40 brands. Among the top 20 brands, GSK and USV have maintained GSK and USV have maintained their rank. The top position 1 and 2 on a MAT basis. Whereas for the month, it is this brand Monosef which has actually come to the number 2 position. If you look at the growth of Monosef, it's a 45% value growth and almost 40% unit growth. Besides this, brands from Cipla, Foracort, Rosuva's from Sun, Udiliv, Pan, Calpol, Volini, Clavim, Rhizodec from Novo, they have shown a very good double-digit value as well as unit growth. Next, shown a very good value as well as double-digit growth is Ultraset, EcoSprint AV, Pantop, Telma, Mikasin, and Electral. So, while the market has grown very good in terms of double-digit, there are some brands which have actually done very, very well in this high-growth market. So, if I were to talk about the key takeaways of this entire analysis for the month of October, the IPM has shown a very robust value and unit growth for the month of October. And among the top therapies, anti-infectives have shown a double-digit value as well as unit growth. All the three levers of growth are strong and positive for the month of October. And all the major therapies except anti-diabetics have shown an encouraging volume growth for the month of October. Several corporates among the top 40 have shown double-digit value as well as unit growth in October 23. While Augmentin and Glycomed GP maintain their top slots on MAT October basis. However, we see there is Monosef, brand from Aristo, which has moved to the number 2 position for the month of October 23. I hope this analysis has been useful for you, and we are open to your suggestions on in terms of whatever analysis you would be requiring in the consecutive months. Before saying thank you, I would also like to wish everybody a very happy Diwali to you and your family and a prosperous new year. Thank you so much.